Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Teng, and I'm the Director of IDA Funds and Enterprise. I'm so glad to be here today to talk about a film that has really moved me in a very profound way. And I'm so honored to be able to speak to the brilliant director of this film, Hunger Ward, Oscar nominee Skye Fitzgerald, and also with Dr. Aisha Jumaan, founder and president of the Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation, which is doing some very important work in Yemen. And so let's begin. I just wanted to check. Skye, are you there? Just if you could come on video, that would be great.
There we are. Got
Hi,
it.
hi, Skye. Hi, Dr. Aisha Jumaan. How are you both today?
Good, thank you.
Very good. Thanks a bunch for doing this, Poe. Means a lot.
No, of course. And I just wanted to quickly ask you both, if you could tell our audience where are you at? Where are you in the world right now? Dr. Aisha?
Okay. I'm actually in Seattle, Washington. That's been my home for a while, but I do travel to Yemen quite extensively. And that's where my main work is in Yemen.
And I'm in Portland, Oregon.
And how are you both doing today?
I'd say I'm emotional. It's been a very challenging time, especially after yesterday.
Yeah.
And had a conference for pledging to support Yemen, and it came short by more than half. So it's been a very difficult time for me because the world knows what Yemen is going through, and for the countries that have contributed to this man-made disaster and crisis, not to come up with the funds to support the people that they've inflicted so much suffering on has been very difficult.
Yeah. And it's been how many years now? Several years now. I think it was end of 2014. That's when the conflict started, and here we are today. And yeah, if I wanted to just seeing the trailer of the film just a while ago, and thinking of what you just shared with us, Dr. Jumaan, it's just bringing all sorts of emotions. It's like I believe a quarter of a million Yemenis have died from the conflict since it began, right? And more, there's a lot of a lot of conversations around how it's going to continue, like the conflict is going to continue, and starvation is going to continue, malnutrition, starvation. And so, just going back to the film, just watching the trailer, it's just so painful to watch. And I'm even actually struggling to find the words, because when I first saw the film, I was 8 months pregnant, and it was difficult to watch. And just seeing it again is bringing all sorts of emotions. And Dr. Aisha, if you could tell us a little bit about your reaction to watching the film, knowing everything that you know about the conflict, about the man-made war, as you said, if you could share your thoughts with us.
So when I first got a chance to see the movie, first of all, I was afraid to watch it alone because I've seen so many very difficult images of children in Yemen, and people feel the need to send me. I get text messages with pictures that I can't actually look at because they're just so painful to look at. So I wanted to watch it with someone else, with a group, so I'm not alone. I did find someone to watch it with me, and it was very difficult. There were certain scenes that just brought so much pain to my heart, and this has been a very painful journey for me. It's been a very painful endeavor. Every time I talk about what's happening in Yemen, and I've tried to repress it because it's important for me to be able to do the work I do, not to be as emotional. When I used to give presentation about Yemen and I would cry, people told me that I wasn't professional. They were more concerned about me appearing professional than about the story I was trying to say. So the movie just brought all those emotions back that for these 5 years I was trying to become professional and not bring my emotions to it. So I'm grateful for Skye and his team because they allowed me be to talk about it as a human being, not as a scientist. I'm an epidemiologist by training. When I give presentations, I tell people 16 million people in Yemen are at risk of famine. That doesn't portray what's happening in Yemen. But the movie showed what it means even for one person to experience famine, what it means for the family, what it means for the people who take care of them,
Mm.
what it means for us, for our humanity. So the movie has done for Yemen a lot more than my 6 years of presentations. So I'm grateful for it. I would admit here also that I have not been able to see all the movie in one sitting.
And to add to that, the war has been going on for so many years now. It's not like we haven't seen images coming out of Yemen. And yet something about this film, I think for me watching it, it was really the how delicately it was made. There are just so many images of of Yemenis who are suffering from the conflict, either children or men or women from starvation or malnutrition. And some of these images really rob people of their human dignity. And I don't think it really helps. No, if you'd agree with me, Dr. Jumaan, it's just so challenging to watch that you just want to switch it off and go do something else or just forget about it. But this film, somehow it activates all these raw emotions, which is why I'm actually finding it very difficult to actually say how I feel. And so I would like to ask you, Skye, what was your thought process? What were you going through as you were thinking of making the film and as you were making it?
I don't know if you know this, Poe. I don't know if I've shared this, but my background is actually theater. And so I went to graduate school as a stage director. And my thesis project was a play called Shadowlands that's based on the work of C.S. Lewis. And I share that because there was one idea in that play that I've just kept with me for all these years, and it really applied when I started to think about making Hunger Ward. And so there's a character in the play who says, "We are like blocks of stone, out of which the sculptor carves the forms of men. The blows of his chisel, which hurt us so much, are what make us perfect." And that stanza in the play has just really, to me, it speaks to grief, of course, right? But it also speaks to this idea of the chisel of life is sort of hitting us all the time, and sometimes it's pain, sometimes it's suffering. There's also joy, there's also happiness, there's also love, and that's part of being human, right? And I think just as in life, in cinema, I think we ought to embrace all those things. And so when I approached Hunger Ward, which I knew was going to be a difficult topic and a difficult context, I really thought of it as that block of stone, right? I knew there were going to be some really hard chisel bites, but I also knew there would be some moments where we could find love and we could find beauty. And that's sort of the metaphor I went into the whole project with. I know that's sort of a metaphorical way to speak about, but I really did have that image and that idea in my mind as we filmed.
And it really comes through in the film because it's not just like, I mean, there is there is quite a bit of suffering, but it wasn't just all that. It was also, you see these doctors trying their best, and it just, for me, it just, watching it, it didn't rob the subjects and the participants of the film of human dignity. And that's why, one couldn't turn away. I certainly couldn't turn away while watching the film. And I wanted to ask you, actually, this sort of goes back to to our conversation that the three of us had yesterday. Aisha, you were saying how, in order to make this film, the filmmaker needs to gain the trust of the people in the film, of the participants, of the hospital, of the community. Could you share that with us? Because you said it so beautifully yesterday. I just wanted to bring it into this conversation as.
Thank you. Of course, there are so many warring factions in Yemen, and there are so many different sides. And Skye and his team were able to film in two different areas that are fighting with one another. So in the south and in the north. That's not very easy to even gain access. If you gain access normally to one area, then you're blocked from another area. So the team was able to do this work into very difficult and not just very difficult, and they don't trust one another. So for a team to be able to travel between these communities actually speaks very much to I think the compassion that the team had for why they wanted to do the movie, and the compassion to the people they worked with, that compassion ended up creating trust to the whole crew. And Skye, I would like to hear from you a little bit about what you said. Is making a film is very different than a reporter who goes in one day and they have to leave. And that again speaks to the trust that you had established to be able to do such a movie in a very challenging environment where everybody doesn't trust anybody who's coming from the outside, especially as an American, where people view America as part of this war.
Yeah, Skye, if you could tell us a bit about the challenges in the field.
Yeah, they were, they were real. Yeah, I would be the last to say this was an easy film to make, but I guess the foundation for answering that question for me personally is just that I've always felt that maybe it's the hard films that are the important ones. I think that I just carry that with me. Maybe it's the stories and the things and the situations that are hard to look at that are the most important to bear witness to. And personally, I've always sort of felt the tap of mortality on my shoulder, and feel that it's incumbent on each of us to to make whatever impact we can today, because we don't know what comes tomorrow, right? And I think that's probably why I chose this story, and why I've chosen stories like this in the past, because it's an opportunity to intervene, to potentially change the dynamic at play if we can do it well. So in this project, it was, that was the foundational, one of the foundational principles is, can we make a film that can intervene? The challenges were multi-layered, fluid, and fully present every day, right? From the outset, as you noted, Aisha, the first was just, gaining access to actually enter the country, because if you don't have the proper paperwork, then you'll either be in prison for a very long time, be disappeared, or immediately be booted out of the country. So we had that whole logistical, geopolitical piece to negotiate, and that involved getting permission from the Hadi government, the globally recognized government based in Riyadh, to get permission, and that took 8.5 months. And then, a parallel track to also get permission from Ansar Allah, from the Houthi group, who holds most of the country, to also gain trust with them and get the proper paperwork from the de facto authorities of the North to operate. So all that was sort of the due diligence on the front end. And then in the field, trust, 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 relationships, 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 right? So the entire intent was to not do a film about the front lines, right? But to do a film about the experience of those who are being most deeply impacted by the war on a daily basis. And so we did that through the doctors and the nurses and the families. And, you know, we married that with the very stiff challenge in front of us, knowing that um, we had to really protect those who were working with us. And we also had to protect our small team as well, which is why we chose to work as much as possible within the confines of these two really respected medical facilities.
And was there something that stood out that you remember very vividly, that was very unexpected, that occurred while you were in production? I'm sure you must have had a whole load of challenges, but if there was one that stood out for you, Skye, if you could share with us.
Every day, Poe.
Every day.
Every day was a new one. There was so every day, you know, it was a perfect example of a project where, you know, the second conception, because I've always thought of there's three conceptions. There's the, you know, the pre-visualization, there's what you find in the field and sort of rally around. Then there's the third, you know, visualization, which happens in post. And I knew we'd have to be really fluid in the second conception in the actual field, because it's a conflict zone, as you noted, Aisha, and because there's real danger, and we needed to really make sure that we were functioning with dignity and respect and honoring the experience of those in front of us at all times while protecting everyone involved. So you know, one of the first sort of moments that happened where we were suddenly in a situation we hadn't anticipated was our very first day of filming, where we'd already worked on building these relationships with Dr. Al Sadiq. We'd already done prep with all of the families in Sadaka Hospital, and had the conversations about who wanted to collaborate and participate. We'd gone through that whole process, and then we actually picked up the cameras and started filming. And Asila, the infant who has this really was suffering from this extreme case of edema of water retention due to severe acute malnutrition, you know, she passed away in front of us. And we were there in the room when it happened, and we were there with the parents when it happened, and they immediately invited us to go to the morgue for the ritual cleansing of the body, and then to go to the graveyard with them to bury her within hours of her passing. And you know, that's not a, as much as you can pre-visualize, as much as you can try to pre-anticipate what you're going to be facing on a daily basis, we didn't anticipate that. And that was the first day. And every day had something like that that we had to sort of adjust to, and whether it's psychologically or just how we move through the day.
Yeah, and just seeing the doctors just go in, day out, having to to work with children in this state.
Yeah.
You know, just watching your film, I think it broke me many times. And so I can't even imagine what it's like, to for you to be filming, and also for these healthcare workers there working under such conditions, which sort of brings me back to this film and how important it is now. You know, I think Dr. Jumaan, as you mentioned yesterday, what you found out, with the conference, and our conversation about this man-made war, in which the West is very complicit. Could you tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Jumaan?
So there are many elements to the war. We have the airstrike that everybody knows about. The one hidden factor of this war that is really the main driver for the famine in Yemen is the blockade on Yemen. And someone just recently published an article and he said, we should not call it a blockade. We should call it a siege. And he told us that in the Middle Ages, people used to besiege a city, so to purposefully induce famine and force the city to surrender. And he said, what we're doing right now, we're doing the same thing. We're in the 21st century, We are using war tactics of the Middle Ages. We are besieging Yemen. All airports, all ports are being blocked. Food cannot get in except with the authorization of the Saudi. Fuel cannot get in except with their authorization. Medicine cannot get in. So the this is actually against international law governing wars. Famine should not be a weapon used against a population, a civilian population. And that's what is happening in Yemen. And all of this is well known to the powers, including the US, France, the UK, and they have not done anything about it. People talk about airstrikes, they talk about peace, but what everybody is doing is holding the Yemeni people hostage to a conflict between, regional powers and between also the US and Iran, when the Yemenis have nothing to do with it. This war started with Obama appeasing the Saudi because he had done the Iran deal. And so he basically sacrificed the Yemeni people to appease the Saudis. And then Trump came and got out of the agreement, and Yemenis are still being held hostage and being sacrificed. And I know that President Biden had said that he is interested in ending the war, but nobody has talked about the blockade. The blockade is the reason we have famine, is the reason we have lack of food, and everything is going, prices are going up. If we look at the COVID economy in a lot of the countries that were shut down because of COVID-19, Yemen has had the COVID economy for 6 years now, where nothing gets in, where they are under that's why it's called a man-made crisis, where they are under the influence and the control of the Saudis. Right now in Yemen, for example, there's a huge shortage of fuel. Yet there are so many ships that were diverted from entering Yemen to Jeddah port. And so that's what I'm talking about, is that we need to talk more about the blockade, because that's the driving force. Actually, Bruce Rydell just published an article yesterday. He's at the Brooklyn Institute. And he said, Biden said that he would stop supporting the Saudi and offensive war on Yemen. And he said the blockade is an offensive tool that the Saudis are imposing on the Yemeni people, and that we should stop that. So I agree with him that we need to end the blockade. We need to have commercial imports getting in. We need to open Sana'a airport. We need people to start helping themselves. There is no aid in the world that can support a population of 30 million people. We cannot continue to ask countries year after year to support a humanitarian crisis that's man-made. So instead of doing that, let us stop this war. Let us stop the blockade of Yemen, and let the Yemeni people start healing. So that would be something that I would advocate for.
And which brings forth to why this film is so relevant now, with all these conversations and talks going and happening, because I guess we shall see what will come out of these things. You mentioned the blockade. There's this ongoing starvation, malnutrition going on in Yemen. I guess, Skye, what are your thoughts? I mean, what are your hopes for this film? And also, with your work, if you could tell us a little bit about the impact work that your film team is doing with the Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the from the outset, the hope and the intent has been that we don't just create a film to be watched, right? Hopefully, it's a film that engenders anger, maybe outrage, or at the very least, when you get to the end of it, poses a lot of questions, right? Because I've never felt my role is one to answer questions as a filmmaker, but it is absolutely my responsibility to, when someone's finished watching the film, to have a lot of questions they want answered, right? So that's been the intent, and so we try to sort of convert that anger into action, into engagement, right? And one of the ways we're doing that is using the film as a vehicle in tandem with Aisha's organization, the Relief and Reconstruction Foundation, with the Yemeni Alliance Committee, with the Friends Committee for National Legislation. Those are our three key partners who we've been doing virtual events with for months now, where we do a screening of the film and then we bring in an expert panel to talk about the issues that the film raises, right? And then there are sort of concrete actions that people can engage with post fact to actually intervene. And those involve everything from, you know, contacting your senators and legislators to direct contact within the Biden administration, to engaging on social media to make sure Yemen becomes more and more present in the media ecosystem. And then of course, Aisha's foundation, and then we've also set up a mechanism where viewers can actually donate directly to the two clinics that we show in the film. So it's a very direct connection there, which was very delicate in the building, but it's been very, very effective so far. So there's a number of engagement tools, and the overall intent, of course, is over time, by partnering together and working together as a coalition, that will be able to exact complete follow through from the recent promises the Biden administration has made. One, the foreign terrorist designation for the Houthis has been hypothetically, reversed. We want to make sure there's complete follow through on that so humanitarian aid can flow freely. We want to make sure that the all offensive operations, which was the language used, will be ended in terms of US engagement with the coalition. We want to know exactly what that means, and we want to see the follow through on it, right? And there needs to be a clarification of meaning behind that. And as Aisha noted, a lifting of the blockade, right, is a key ask that needs to happen in order for this this human caused starvation of children to end. And that's my personal goal in the end, is I want as an American to be able to say that my tax dollars, right, are not funding a government that are actively causing the starvation of a child in 2021. That's my goal.
Yeah, and I think you've successfully pulled it off because in watching the film, I feel even as a resident in the United States, I don't feel absolved from what is happening in Yemen as a taxpayer.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and I hope that many people in the West, particularly in the US, UK, and France, the coalition that's backing the Saudis in this proxy war, man-made conflict in Yemen, will actually get to see it because we are not absolved. I think with a lot of photographs and films and media out there about what's happening in Yemen, it's the one still image. It's a news clip, and one feels totally removed. But in watching Hunger Ward, it actually got me to think, and I'm sure it'll get a lot of viewers to think about their own complicity in this conflict. And so I just wanted to thank you for that, for making this film. But I also wanted to ask you, you were there at these two hospitals. What did you was was there something that stood out for you from these two hospitals? Were they going through the same challenges, the doctors, or were they very different because they were in different territories and regions?
That's a great question, Poe. And that was a very conscious choice, probably obviously so, to focus on two facilities in different parts of the country, one in the Houthi-held north and one in the south. Because one of the things I wanted to really aim for with the film was to make sure that, despite the fact that these two clinics were in completely different parts, controlled by different parties, that the basic effect on your average Yemeni child is the same. The effect of the war is the same. Dr. Al-Sadiq and Makia Maji in the north are facing the same challenges with the children facing severe acute malnutrition, and it's war-induced. So even though there is this air blockade over the north, right, many of the same challenges are being faced by the hospital in the south, once again, because of the war. So the fact that Omeima in the film, the 10-year-old girl, who weighs 24 pounds, the challenges that she had to overcome with her family to reach Sadaka Hospital are just extreme. I mean, the distances, the number of checkpoints she has to go through, the cost of diesel for her to get from her village in the far west of the country to Sadaka. There are these incredible barriers, and there's no guarantee she can even get to Sadaka for treatment. So there's these shared challenges between the different parts of the country, and I think by showing both of those, it's harder to to look at the geopolitics and then just dismiss the film, right? To say it's biased towards one or the other, because the reality is this is the effect on children all over the country. And so that's why we really chose to work in both parts of the country.
And as you were filming in these two hospitals, what did the doctors say to you? What did the healthcare workers say to you that they wanted the world to see, or they wanted to show you?
Well, first off, we never would have been able to bear witness to some of those really intimate moments and scenes unless they wanted us there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way we could have imposed ourselves on any of those scenes because they're desperate and vulnerable moments, right? And so that's where that relationship building went on. After we shared our intent, um, they really welcomed us into these moments. The general sentiment was they felt like what was happening in front of them as they did their best with their incredible training and experience to treat these children was going unseen, was
Mm.
going unheard. And they wanted to make sure that those outside of the country who were again complicit in the conflict could see and understand how this war was affecting the common person, the common villager, the common person who lives in an apartment in Aden, and that we could help them with that process. And part and parcel of that challenge is the fact that it's so very difficult for filmmakers and journalists to operate freely in the country because of the war, because the de facto authorities, for the most part, all over the country, don't want people to know that this war is causing suffering on this scale, right? And then it's causing the active starvation of children, right? And so they felt like we were in this unique position where we could help them do this. We could help them get this story out in a way that they couldn't.
Was there any point in filming where either the doctor said to you, or okay, maybe this is too much, or you felt like it was really too much for you? I'm just wondering because I mean, just watching this film, which is about 40 minutes long, I mean, there were so many moments that were so difficult to watch, but yeah, I couldn't stop watching. I mean, what was it like for you as a filmmaker, and also for the doctors? Was it at any point was it like I need to put my camera down, or they told you, oh, could you put your camera down? And I just would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, consent is an active thing, right? It's something that it's not static. It's ongoing and um, has to be actively discussed all the time. And so I tried to just stay really open to that notion and to that conversation. With the doctors, to answer your question, there was never a moment where Dr. Al Sadiq or Makia asked us to stop filming. So it wasn't the case for them. There was one moment for me personally where when Asila passed, the child with edema, the very first day, when the family invited us to document the ritual cleansing of the body, um, I was surprised because that's such a personal, private thing, and it's such a, it's so regarded as a key component within Islam. And so, but they invited us to, and they wanted us to cover. So that was a moment where I just had to stop and think about it for a moment and consider whether we wanted to. We did in the end, although we didn't include it in the film. I guess the other one that was really that was challenging too. One was Salha, who is sort of the matron of the Sadaka ward, and she's not a physician, but she's present in many of the scenes, and she's the one who we track after the death of Takana into the milk room as she starts to break down and grieve the loss of Takana. And we'd been working with her for a month at that point, and so she was so used to us being with her, but that was a moment where we weren't sure how she was going to react, and then she did welcome us into it in the end. And then there was one moment with Dala, with the grandmother,
Yeah.
when Dala passed, where we had long conversations with her and the rest of the family as Dala was being treated for weeks before she passed. And then day of, when Dala passed, there was a moment where she asked us to stop for a while, where she asked us to stop filming, and we kind of went away. And then once she'd recovered, we sort of returned to the process of filming what was happening. But there was one moment where she decided that was enough for that moment, and she didn't want us there, and so we just had to exit, and respect that.
And Dr. Jumaan, your foundation works also with some of these healthcare workers in these hospitals. You talked earlier about sort of the bigger picture on what needs to stop, with the blockade, and but if you could tell us what needs to continue as well in terms of aid, if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the UN just announced, as I said, 16.2 million people in Yemen are food insecure and at risk of famine. So we do need to continue to provide food to these families, because one is they cannot afford. And so that's one thing Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation actually was established for, is we started with food baskets, because I knew that is something that is going to be very challenging for many families. When I talked to Skye and learned about the clinic in Aslam, it was quite a coincidence, because we had actually worked in that clinic distributing food when the whole area was completely blocked and nobody could get in, and not even food for the market. And people there resorted to eating tree leaves. So when I heard that news, I immediately said, we need to be there. We were able to get all the proper permissions, and we were the only organization and the first organization to be allowed in Aslam, in which we distributed food baskets to 500 families at that point in time. And we selected them based on, again, families who have children who are severely malnourished. And again, when I learned about Makia, again, through this movie, we contacted her, and we now are, collaborating with her. We would be providing, again, food baskets to families whose children are facing malnutrition. We do have other potential projects that we can work with her on as well. And so our office in Yemen is in contact with Makia, and we're very excited to continue to work with her. We work throughout Yemen, and we work with locals, so that is the locals know who is in need. They know their environment better than anybody else. So that gives us access to most of Yemen, even the mountainous areas where a lot of international aid agencies cannot reach. So we continue to work in a lot of these places. But again, Yemen Relief alone, or not any one organization alone, can do that. The WFP, the World Food Program, and WHO and UNICEF and all of these organizations that had requested aid for their humanitarian work in Yemen will need to continue to do that. Between December 2019 and April of 2020, the families that used to receive food parcels dropped from about 13 to about 9. And that was in April of 2020. So I'm assuming there are a lot more families that are dropped off the list of families receiving food distribution. So that's, again, is extremely concerning. The UN says there are 2.3 million Yemeni children who are suffering from acute malnutrition. Of these, 400,000 are going to die within weeks or months. So unless something drastic happens and they get relief. So the numbers are staggering, and the stories that we see in the movie, we've seen two clinics. This is something that Yemeni are suffering throughout Yemen. We need to multiply those numbers we see in the movies by the millions to understand the issue that the Yemenis are facing.
Yeah. And it's hard to wrap one's mind around numbers because, it's like, what do numbers tell us? 1 million, 4 million, suffering children suffering from malnutrition. It's like, what does that even mean to a certain point? Which is why I'm so grateful that this film exists and that I hope many people will get to see it. And Skye, you were mentioning that this film is going to be out publicly soon. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is sort of. Yeah, it is. So we were fortunate to have a distributor come, and MTV Documentary Films picked it up this week, and so it actually launched on Pluto TV on Monday. So it went public yesterday, and eventually it will go onto the on-demand slot on Pluto TV. We don't know exactly the timing for that, but we'll post that on our website when it does occur. And then we're still continuing to do a number of virtual free screenings, like we talked about earlier, just to sort of like have policy discussions around and to sort of continue to generate the biggest media footprint we can within the ecosystem to like engage folks, right? To get people involved and aware through the medium of the film to engage, hopefully activate them as well.
Yeah. And could you tell us, so how do folks search for the film? They just type in Hunger Ward, or they go on Twitter, spin_film. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then our website is hungerward.org. And that's really the sort of like hub for all things Hunger Ward, where we post press, we post screenings, we post events like this so that people can really find all information about the film. And that's where we'll put the information about the screening information as well.
And to all those who are watching, I mean, I really, really implore you to watch this film. Take your time. You might want to watch it alone. I watched it alone, and yeah, it was. I think it broke me many times, and I couldn't hold my emotions back, and it was good. I think it was important. It was important because when one sees, I don't know, when one sees all the images, again, I keep on repeating this, but when one sees all the imagery that's coming out of Yemen, it's so easy to turn away. But this film, somehow it just makes you want to watch through the whole thing and not turn away. And with all that's happening in terms of as Aisha mentioned, the millions of children who are already malnourished, and those and the numbers in terms of starvation that are going to continue, we cannot turn away. I wanted to open it up to you both in case there's anything that you'd like to add.
Michael, I saw the question that you just put in the chat. So the food that gets into Yemen gets in, as I said, intermittently. So that makes it very expensive. There's also, which is ironic, food that is also brought in from Saudi Arabia, and it's through back channels or with that gets into Yemen. So the prices of foods are about 200% of what they used to be. And that's where we get the food. There is no way for us to be able to send food to Yemen. We have been trying to send leukemia medicine that's been donated through Novartis for a whole year, and we've been unsuccessful. I have ultrasound devices, handheld ultrasound devices that the Ministry of Health in Yemen needed for both the South and the North. And we have not been able to send that. We're trying to work with big donor agencies like the WHO to get them to Yemen. We've been having a very hard time. So sending food to Yemen would be impossible. So we buy what's available, locally available. We also try to buy from farmers what they have. For example, in Sada, they have a lot of lentil farms. So we buy lentils and include it in our food baskets. In Hajjah, for example, there are some chicken farms. And so we buy eggs and add it to our food basket. So whatever is available locally, we buy. But our you know, that's how we get our food. It's a local. We cannot send it definitely from here.
Skye.
Yeah, so Poe, this is maybe a question for you to some extent. You know, when I sent you a link to the film, I think I did a disclaimer, right? Which was, I think I wrote something like, watch it alone or watch it in a quiet place or something. I'd love to hear from you what that disclaimer ought to be, because I don't really know personally, being so close to the project, how to articulate it. You know, speaking personally for me, I'm motivated, and I'm not usually like that, but I'm motivated by anger, right? I am angry by the current status quo that we've just talked about. I'm angry that I wake up in a world where a a 10-year-old girl weighs 24 pounds and we're part of what's causing that. I'm angry by that. And my hope is that the film, we can convert that anger into action, right? Just like Aisha and I and the rest of the organizations have been trying so hard to do. So that's my intent, that's my goal, and we're just gonna soldier on as long as we can. But what should I be saying, Poe, when I send people a
I
link?
don't know. I think like you're saying so much through your film, and you're helping all these doctors and these health workers say so much through the film. You're helping Yemenis say so much through their film because, it's so easy to see imagery and images of war and conflict and turn away. And this when one watches Hunger War, when I watched Hunger War, I was really upset. And they weren't like tears of, oh, I'm sad and now I want to go into a blanket and just like wrap myself and forget about this or go out for dinner. No, it was like, it got me thinking. The Saudi coalition, it got me thinking. As somebody who pays taxes in the US, it got me thinking about arms sales from that Canada, UK, no, it's Canada, US, and then UK is providing technical support. I'm not sure whether they're also selling arms, but they might be selling arms as well, to the Saudis. And then it made me think about the blockade that Dr. Jumaan, that you spoke about. I think it brings about this sort of frustration and anger, which unfortunately the conflict's been around since 2014. We've seen all these in the news, and I don't feel anything anymore. And that is why I'm imploring everybody who to watch this film, because we cannot absolve ourselves from this conflict. We cannot wash our hands clean and say this is a war on the other side of the world in which we have no part of. And you've done that so beautifully, Skye, and it goes back to everything that we spoke about during this conversation, about the intent, about building the trust, about navigating these challenges. So I don't know. I feel like you're doing it so well through the film, and I'm really grateful to have seen it. And so
Oh,
thank.
yeah, that means a lot from you. So thank you, as a friend and colleague. Thank you so much for watching it, and then for thinking deeply about it enough to sort of come on and have this conversation. It does mean a lot.
Yeah, I hope folks in the Biden administration will get to watch it. Have you reached out? You must have reached out to them already, Skye.
We've tried. Aisha probably has more intel on that than I do, because we do a lot of back channel work. So I don't know what you can say and what you can't say, Aisha.
So yeah, we work with different groups and different people. Hassan and I from Hassan from FCNL and I gave a briefing to the Biden administration on Yemen. They gave us 25 minutes, which I think was very good, because we told them what we think. I think the Biden administration is on the right track. However, they need to speed up their processes. One thing that gets me really upset is when people say we need to find a face-saving way for Mohammed bin Salman, who is the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, out of this. And I'm like, so everybody is more concerned about saving face for Mohammed bin Salman than the million of people being affected. How what world are we living in if somebody's ego is more important. And so I think, again, I would tend to agree with, Bruce Rydell in his recent article when he says, we basically need to start the peace negotiation in Yemen, and it will start with lifting the blockade first, because that is an act of aggression. And once that's lifted, then everybody needs to come to the table and negotiate a peace that is inclusive of everyone who's fighting in Yemen. One thing also that he recommended, which I also, when Hassan and I briefed the administration on, we talked about, there is a UN resolution that was written by the Saudis in 2015, and it was rushed through the UN Security Council by France, the UK, and the US, hoping or thinking that the Russians were going to veto it like they do with Syria resolutions. Of course, Mohammed bin Salman promised the Russians he will buy weapons from them, and this idiotic war, resolution passed. And these are not my words; these are the words of the Yemen UN envoy who was negotiating peace in Yemen. So that UN resolution does not support a peaceful negotiation. It insists that the Saudi win, basically. So that UN resolution needs to be revised. There have been a lot of calls by the previous UN envoy to Yemen, by Bruce Rydell, and by a lot of people. The Guardian that also just published on that. So that UN resolution needs to be revised so it is inclusive and it's fair and it's just and doesn't favor the aggressor on Yemen. So that would be, these are some of the issues we briefed administration on.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Dr. Jumaan. We had a question here for the panel, but I believe you already answered it, which is like, what is the solution to the Yemeni war? Which you've just laid out your thoughts on that. I guess this is a good question to end with from someone who's asking, what do the Yemenis want? Dr. Aisha Jumaan.
Like everybody else, like you and like I, and like the person who asked the question. They want to not have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from. There was a woman in Ib who had 4 children. She committed suicide with all her kids because she found it too painful to continue to ask people for food. And that was her solution out of the predicament that she was in. Like all of us, they want peace. They want to be able to teach for their kids to go to school. There are 2 million Yemeni children who are out of school. They want to be able to go to work without being afraid of an airstrike. There have been airstrikes on Yemen every single day from March 25th, 2015 until today. There isn't a day that passed without airstrikes on Yemen. So I would ask everyone who listens, what do you want? And that's the same thing what the Yemeni want as well.
Thank you. Is there anything else, Skye, that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think this was a great way to end it, Poe. I just want to thank both you and Aisha for doing this, for engaging so fully. And Aisha, we shall continue the march forward, obviously. But Poe, again, I just want to reiterate, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your engagement. It means a lot from such a respected colleague.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right.
Thank you all.
Until next time.
Bye-bye.